All right, here we go. Bob Digital, Tenement TV, week 13, college football breakdown. Hard to believe we are already this far into the season. Uh, Getting down to the nitty gritty, we're talking college football playoffs, big time implications this week. So we will jump right into it. Without further ado, obviously the marquee matchup of this week. Uh, Two top five teams. We have Indiana, ranked fifth in the country, Ohio State, number two. Hoosiers traveling into Columbus. Very uncharted territory here for the Hoosiers, vying for a college football playoff spot. A lot of national debate going on right now as far as you know, do they belong? Is there, do they have a good enough strength of schedule? Who have they played? What are their opponents? A lot of that, a lot of just, to be honest, just mindless Indiana football slander, where people are just kind of thinking about what they know about Indiana football of the past and applying that to what they think should be happening right now. So, anyway, putting that aside, I will get some of your thoughts here, I guess, initially on this game. I think we kind of maybe offer some unique perspectives, you being an Ohio State guy, myself obviously being an Indiana guy, and we will see kind of where I think we don't necessarily differ too much on our opinions of these teams. But just curious, I guess, to hear first your perspective on where you weigh in on this battle of heavyweights, dare I say.
No, I think it's one of it's certainly a fascinating game because we're certainly in a new era of college football. And I know we've talked, a couple times. Indiana is one of those teams, and there's certainly a couple in college football where you've seen the new current era with the transfer portal, the ability for teams to turn around or move very quickly as far as like their power rating or how good they are, up or down significantly. Indiana's on the upside of that. They're a team that's moved up in my power ratings over 2 touchdowns from the beginning of the year. And we were high on them to start the year. Florida State on the other side is a team who's obviously very much struggling, relied on the portal a ton. None of those guys hit. They're 1-9 overall. They've dropped actually close to like 20 points in my power ratings, like from the start of the season, and is that enough? So we're seeing these large turns, in a team's number that we've quite frankly never seen before. So Indiana is quite frankly an interesting test case. And yeah, the power rating and the teams they've played this year aren't, aren't among the hardest schedules in the country. However, they are boat racing those teams. So we got to give Indiana credit for that. As far as this game in particular, I think it gets more interesting, and Ohio State is certainly going to be their toughest test. Just with a different talent level, Ohio State hasn't played or Indiana hasn't played a talent level of Ohio State. This many 5 stars, on an opposing roster. The only real comparison we can give is 2 weeks ago when Indiana played Michigan in a game that we saw year over year. And what Michigan last year, I know they won a national title. They've had a bunch of turnover. They were 30-point favorites over Indiana last year. Well, this year Indiana was 2 touchdown favorites. I mean, that's an absurd flip, But anyway, going into that, Michigan has a really formidable defensive line, and that's the strength of the team. That's where they have a ton of talent there. IU really struggled in the second half of that game. Kind of held on kind of late in that. They only had 40 yards rushing. They were 230 yards below their season average in offensive output, an offense that's been top 5 in the country all season. They allowed 4 sacks to Michigan in their previous 9 games. They've allowed 7 all year. So that is a little bit of a concern for me on the Indiana offense and how it'll perform, stepping up in class versus an Ohio State defense that's top 10 in the country, maybe top 5, maybe higher on that. On the Ohio State side of that, big news on Tuesday, their center Seth McLaughlin tore his Achilles, unfortunately. I know when we've broken down Ohio State previously, we have talked a lot about this offensive line, how it's been a concern. Depth, I don't think any team in the country has real depth on the offensive line. Now we're talking about two starters, the backup left tackle's out. You're talking third string, you're moving people around. Um, I do think IU's defensive line has gotten a lot of push this year against a lot of teams, and I think it's the strength of their defense. So the ability to maybe get pressure that matchup. It's actually Ohio State offensive line is called the running game with two very talented backs and with Judkins and Henderson to be inconsistent a lot of the year because of the line play. Um, but this IU defense is tough to gauge overall. 7 of the 10 teams they've played are outside the top 100 in offense. We can't give credit for Michigan for that. It is a massive step up. Early in the no, before I get to the kind of the actually, so I will get to the market. So the market on this game was interesting. Opened in this 10.5, 11.5 range. It was Ohio State was the sharp side earlier in the week. It got bet out, getting as high as 13.5. Then Thursday, so Tuesday night, the Achilles injury happens. IU gets bet down a little bit, but a big move came in Thursday night from a really respected bettor with quite large and deep pockets, betting IU all the way down to the current market at 10.5. For me in this game, I think we're in the right range with the number. Bet most talented team Indiana's played. I think we saw IU just struggle to score against Michigan, and the closest defensive talent they've played. IU's or Ohio State's offensive line injuries. I think they can. I don't see them getting to 30 here with that and creating that margin. I'll take under 52.5. I think we see a low scoring game. I'm not sure now with the offensive line injuries about margin in the side, so I'm going to stick with the under here.
All right. So here's what I'm going to say, right? So like we obviously this Indiana team has outperformed expectations. We both liked them even going into the season, more so I think than the market did. They were at 5.5 wins. We both certainly liked that to go over. Maybe didn't expect to get it to 10-0, but you as a non-IU fan even said there is
you in July.
You said there is a scenario. You're like, dude, buckle up. Like, make sure you're sitting down for this one. There is a scenario where this team could be 8-0. Now we're sitting in a situation where it's 10-0. 2 of those wins have come against the 2 teams that were playing in the national championship last year. And obviously, look, there's been some roster turnover. There's been a lot of changes going on, right, for other teams. But now all of a sudden we are being, sold this narrative that Indiana is just playing this horrible schedule. And while I'm not going to, act like they had, look, they've avoided Oregon, they've avoided Penn State. They've avoided, but it's like they didn't create their Big Ten schedule. And, they've been in years in Big Ten East prison camp of, having to play the, Michigan. They didn't decide that Michigan was going to be bad this year, and it's not like that's a talentless team either. I don't know. I feel like they're being treated as if they are a G5 team when at the end of the day, this is an undefeated team in a Power 5 conference. Like, I don't care. So I said all that to say, I do think they are being disrespected to some extent here based on track record and past performance. And because at the end of the day, this is a team that we're seeing that has been improperly rated all year long. I mean, they have just, not only are they undefeated against the spread, I mean, I guess they did lose against the spread to Michigan. That was their first, I believe that was their first loss against the spread.
Depending on the number you got in their opener against FIU.
Sure. Not only are they covering games, they are covering games by a wide margin. I mean, this team has not been properly handicapped at any point this season. So I don't know why we're supposed to be led to believe that now, like this is the final test that, now they get a real game where they're going to finally, face their reckoning. And it's like, no, like this team is playing good football. They are not winning by the skin of their teeth. They're not just skating by and barely, winning these coin flip games. Like, they are demolishing teams. It started when they went into UCLA and gave them an absolute dose in the Rose Bowl. And that kind of raised some eyebrows, but okay, UCLA, not very good. But then all they've done is just bulldoze through their entire Big Ten schedule and crush teams. So outside, they had a little bit of struggle with Washington. However, albeit with Indiana's quarterback out that game, they struggle with Michigan. But look, like, everybody has a little bit of a flat spot. Everybody's allowed to have a flat spot. At the end of the day, you need to win that game, and
I
they
thought that was the
did.
first game they felt pressure.
Right. And guess what? They left with a W. So
Mhm.
I don't know. It's driving me insane, some of these narratives that I feel like are being spun up about Indiana football. But before I kind of get you and maybe into a little bit more of your prediction here, I will. I have some stats that I like here, right? So Indiana, first of all, they have not beat Ohio State in 28 years. This is a 28-year drought that we are facing here. Um, Not a whole lot of teams go into Columbus, into the shoe, and come out with a win. No matter, regardless of the talent level, regardless of how well you like your prospects, your team, your coach, whatever. There are not very many teams that come out of here with a win, one way or another. So, not going to be the most disappointing outcome ever if Indiana doesn't win. However, they have an elite pass rusher on the front lines, and Mikhail Kamara. This man, he leads. So the Indiana defense as a whole, they are fourth in the FBS in pass rush grade. They have a dynamic pass rush unit. So Kamara, who I referenced, this man, he's going to be playing on Sundays pretty soon. He leads all FBS with 53 pressures on the quarterback. There's 7 other players on the IU defense with at least 10 pressures apiece. Granted, look, Indiana maybe hasn't faced the toughest pass attacks, as you alluded to, but now they're facing a team that has trouble up front, a team that's playing their backup center, a team that's playing they're on their third string left tackle, who is actually a guard that they moved over after 2 left tackles got injured. So problems up front against a team that gets after you defensively. So I guess that's number one. Ohio State, 115th ranked pass blocking. Will Howard.
Not great under
Most would
pressure.
not say he's the greatest or the most mobile or fleet-footed quarterback out there. So not super great under pressure. However, he is ranked number 8th in the country in pass grade. So he has, I think, looked better maybe definitely better than what we saw at Kansas State. He's I think improved week over week as the season has gone on. Some of that you can always say is, look, like, it's hard to look bad as an Ohio State quarterback with the weapons kind of at your disposal. But I think Kamara should be wreaking havoc on the defensive line. I think he's going to cause problems. I think that's what they're definitely going to go for. The last thing I'll say is that, Indiana rotates their safeties more than any team in the country. So they have a little bit of a unique coverage scheme that they like to show. What they try to do is they like to force quarterbacks to kind of see these rotations post snap, delay their decision making, which then leads to getting more pressure, right? They're trying to confuse the quarterback, throw him off to what he's seeing, and then get pressure. So they're getting pressure and they're kind of confusing the quarterback on the back end. And Ohio State has injuries on the offensive line. To me, if the ball's getting out late, that's big trouble for Ohio State here. Now, they should be able to run the ball. Obviously, they always have NFL guys toting the rock. Always have NFL guys at running back. So I could see them trying to maybe kind of impose their will, maybe kind of dominate the ball, run the ball, kind of dictate the game that way. But I don't know. I see if they get into a situation where they're having to throw the ball, I see Indiana disrupting this pocket, and I could see Will Howard getting pressured into some mistakes, quite frankly. And when teams are rotating their coverage, he only has a 58 pass. His passing grade goes down significantly whenever teams are rotating coverage and getting pressure on him. So that's the case I'll make for Indiana. I would like to hear if you have any thoughts on some of that, on some of those notes, as far as from a matchup perspective. Obviously, look, if we're comparing prospects, Indiana, or Ohio State goes beats nearly every team outside of maybe two or three in the whole country at most.
Yep.
If we're just going prospect for prospect, talent for talent, like there's maybe two teams that can actually go toe to toe or beat them in that department. However, we don't. This game is not won on who has the best prospects. Just ask Miami about that every year. So, anyway, what are your thoughts there on maybe some of the mismatches that IU can take advantage of?
I think the matchup between the IU defensive line and the Ohio State offensive line, especially with these injuries, is literally what's going to determine the game, the spread, everything. Because Ohio State's receiving core is way better than the defensive backs in Indiana. It just is. That's not a slight to Indiana's defensive backs. It's been a fine unit this year. Ohio State's receivers are elite. If the offensive line protects well, gives Will Howard time, he's going to tear them up. And if they're able to control the ground game, I mean, that won't be good for the Hoosiers. Will Howard isn't great under pressure. He is a little more mobile, and I do think the rushing numbers this year, we're really seeing teams. We saw it with Oregon last year. We've seen it with some SEC teams as well. We're really seeing it even on the NFL level with Josh Allen. Teams really not spamming the running quarterback in the run game, except for big games. You'll see like an increase in running back carries, design runs for the quarterback in games that are deemed big or in clutch situations to just try to preserve health, quite frankly. We saw last year in the Missouri Bowl game, Ohio State didn't have the best quarterback situation beyond Will Howard. That's why they had to go in the portal. They have some young guys, but are they ready? And I'm not a fan of Brown either. But so that's why I don't think we've seen a ton of that, and I think you will in some of these bigger games or in some crucial spots. And I think that is a way, using Will Howard more in the ground game would be a way for them to gain an extra blocker in the running game to defend a good IU front in that. So I really think that is the key to the game. I think that is why I think we see it go under. Actually, Ohio State plays at a slower pace than you'd think under Chip Kelly. You think of the wide open offenses at Oregon and whatnot, but he's not running that quick as much anymore. All that. I think it's like a 27-17 game. It's not very fun because it's right on the number at 10, in that 10.5, 11 range. That's where I think we end up. I do think Ohio State ultimately pulls it out. I do think it's a really competitive, low-scoring game, though.
Yeah, and that's where I think, look, I took some 13.5 earlier in the week. I felt that, like I said, I have never been much of an Indiana football homer. I know what this program has been my entire life, but I know that this is not the same. Like, this is not the same program that we've seen, over all these years. And for whatever you want to call it, whether it's the Coach Sig bravado, he came in and he's, talking shit left and right and saying all this stuff. But like, this man has backed up every word that he's said. This team buys in. They play the way that they embody their coach, right? Like, this team plays the same way. Like, they play to his personality. They aren't scared. He brought, a big crew of guys, 15 guys over from JMU. So like, they already kind of knew the culture. And we're just kind of seeing something that, I know it gets tossed around a lot, but like, this is unprecedented for somebody to just come into a team that, quite frankly, was maybe the worst Power 5 football program in the country all time, and has just turned them into a legitimate force overnight. Now, it remains to be seen, I guess, how if that has staying power, if that can continue beyond that this year. But like, what is happening this year is absolutely not a fluke. This is a good football team. They play good football. They're disciplined. They don't make mistakes. they take advantage of your mistakes, and they're just, I know I've seen it over. A lot of people have said they're a pain in the ass to play because they're just kind of like, they're not going to beat themselves, and they're just going to kind of like hang around and like play disciplined. They're not going to be. You are going to have to make plays to beat them, which ultimately I think is why they were able to win that Michigan game, because Michigan didn't really have the ability to make plays when they needed to. So the only last thing that I'll make on this is, Indiana has the best offensive grade in Power 4 this year. Now, obviously, an argument can be made of, oh, well, who are those opponents against? They racked up 70 points against Western Illinois, and but outside of that, I mean, they've been, even against more legitimate opponents, they have been a wagon on offense. A lot of that led by quarterback Curtis Rourke, who leads the nation in passing grade. Now, granted, whatever you want to say about their schedule, they have not faced a defense quite like Ohio State, who has only given up 17 points one time. Every single game they've held their opponent under 17 points. They've given up 17 points one time. That was to Oregon at Autzen, where they lost 32-31, which, it's not like their defense was a train wreck that game, right? It's just they played a really
Oregon's good too.
right. So, but I will say last week against Michigan, or I should say Indiana's coming off a bye, which, to be honest, I don't know. I feel like that's a little bit of an advantage here. But 2 weeks ago against Michigan was the only time this season they haven't scored at least 31 points. So this IU team moves the ball. They're very efficient on offense. They have playmakers. They got a quarterback who's accurate when they protect him. Like, I don't know. I know what Ohio State is. I know what the talent advantage is, but I just really, really feel like Indiana has a real shot to win this game.
I'll ask you this: what point number does IU need to get to, you feel, to win the game? So do you think since you think they're live, what number? Like, hey, if they get to blank, I think they're live here. Because it's not. I don't think it's like 17 or 14 or anything like that.
No. They can't win like a muck it up. I can't see them doing like a muddy it up and just play ugly and like, a fist fight like that. That's not really what they're going to be able to do here. I think they're going to need a score. I think they're going to maybe need to get Ohio State on their back heels, maybe get out to maybe score on the opening possession, then maybe force a punt. And then all of a sudden it's like, then the horseshoe's nervous, right? Then people are like gasping and are screaming at Ryan Day. And like, that's really where they need to be. So I think, to answer your question, I mean, I want to say 31 is like 31 is probably the number, but I don't know. They could win this game 28-20. Like, I could see that, but to your point, that still kind of comes back to that under being a good shout, right? Like, I don't know. There's a lot of scenarios I could see here. I mean, Ohio State, none of this is about me saying that Ohio State is bad or overrated or anything. I mean, Ohio State deserves all of the credit, all the accolades, everything. I mean, they are number 2 in the country and well-deserved. I just feel like Indiana is not maybe getting the full amount of credit that they deserve. But I think we kind of saw that, right? This number's already come down. I mean, a couple weeks ago, we were sitting at 17, and it's come down a touchdown from a few weeks ago, and it came down another 3 points from a couple days ago. So maybe they are starting to get a little bit more of that credit. I think the talent advantage is always going to have Ohio State just naturally be favored by a lot more, especially with the home field advantage, regardless of opponent. But I don't know.
You saw them, 17 against Iowa and 25 against Nebraska. -3.5 at Oregon.
So one last question I will pitch before we move on from this game is, paint me both scenarios. Indiana wins. Who gets in? I mean, obviously that punches Ohio State's ticket into the college football playoff. I think they win that game as long as they just don't lose to Michigan. I don't think it'll matter. They could lose to Oregon again, and they'd probably still be in. 2 losses to Oregon, and they'd probably still find their way into the playoff. Um, Indiana, if they lose this game, uh, let's say even a close game, like where does that kind of leave them as far as, assuming they also beat Purdue in the final game?
Ooh, don't like predicting this committee. I think they do whatever the bleep they want. Just kind of. I thought what they did with BYU was interesting and kind of an unheralded story. On Tuesday night, they moved them to a point where they're not getting, like the Big 12 is getting one bid. They just moved them down enough to where really crazy things have to happen, like, to kind of make sure the Big 12 just gets one bid. So be curious to see how far they drop, and it'll just be a random decision by a randomly group picked, a random selection of athletic directors and whoever the hell's on that stupid committee. I think 11-1 IU should be in, because I think that's good for the sport. As a betting man, yes, I look at power ratings and, but there has to be a balance of best team and most deserving. And Indiana would certainly qualify in most deserving at 11-1. I don't think, I think they should be in. I don't know what the committee will do though. I imagine, the current brackets keep showing, home games in Bloomington.
Sure.
I don't think that can happen.
Sure.
And without a win against Ohio State, I think they would be going on the road in round one, and be that 11 seed, last team in kind of deal. I think that's probably the best case scenario with a win.
Sure.
Or with a loss to Ohio State, assuming it's close.
Yeah. No. Good points all around there. All right. Well, without this becoming an Indiana-Ohio State full show here, we can keep it moving. Move on to Army playing Notre Dame. This game being played at a neutral site. Notre Dame laying 14. Total sitting at 45.5. I will kind of let you take it away here for a second and kind of share some of your thoughts on this game.
Okay, yeah. So the game's at Yankee Stadium, in the Bronx. So from a proximity standpoint, obviously very close to Army and West Point being in New York there. It is technically a Notre Dame home game as far as like the ticket allotment, though. We saw Jeff Monken, the Army head coach, kind of note that there will probably be more Notre Dame fans, obviously bigger fan base in general than Army, but that's just an interesting note here. Army, great story, still undefeated. They still haven't played a team, though, you really talk about schedules. They haven't played a team in the top 80 in my power rankings. Their worst 2 performances are their 2 most recent games. I faded them heavy against North Texas. I actually thought Daly was going to be out against the Mean Green. He struggled throwing in that game. They won 14-3. The offensive line lacked push in that game, and that's a horrific North Texas defense. North Texas had a ton of red zone struggles in that game. They missed 2 wide open touchdowns. Was not a great performance. I do think the bye came at a good time for Army. I think it helps Daly's health. We've seen Army struggle in later in seasons before because of, that they're college kids, but they have a lot of military commitments outside of football. So I thought they were really sluggish in their last 2. This is Notre Dame's second time facing the option. Now we're seeing Navy run a slightly different version of the option. This one's a little more traditional. But they have a really experience with Marcus Freeman at head coach and Al Golden as defensive coordinator. They've seen the option a bunch. Freeman was at Cincinnati in the same conference as Navy when they ran a more traditional option. Al Golden's been around football for 107 years. This Notre Dame defense is elite. It's number 1 in stop rate, which is drives that end in punt, turnovers, etc. Stud defensive tackle Harold Cross he is listed as questionable. Um, but the backups are still quality. I think they'll be fine there with that. Recently, we've really seen Notre Dame start to bury teams and not let up. The running game has been good. It's been explosive. Riley Leonard, the quarterback's really getting a feel and is improved in the offense with more time. Um, they've serviceable wide receivers. I'm not as concerned about their offensive line depth. They've had some injuries on that unit because of the talent gap against Army. I make this game closer to 17 at the end of the day. I laid 14 with the Irish. I think they're a really good bet this week. I think they're going to get margin. We saw Notre Dame get up 35-0 on Virginia and kind of let in a fortunate backdoor for me because I was on Virginia in that game last week. I think that Notre Dame can put up a number here. Army will struggle to score, so I'll lay the 14 with Notre Dame here.
Yeah, and that's the thing. We've covered Notre Dame a couple of different times over the course of this season here, and despite they obviously have the blemish to Northern Illinois on their resume right now, but outside of that, they have been fairly impressive. Pretty good, impressive win going into Texas A&M getting a win, and then outside of that, I mean, they really haven't had a lot of trouble with the rest of their schedule. Now, that Northern Illinois game certainly does stick out as it's not really an easy sin to forgive, I guess. But I don't know. They've looked good outside of that.
It plays into them needing margin, though. If you think they need style points,
right,
but I also still just believe if they win, against Army this week and then against USC next week, I think 11-1 Notre Dame is like auto win. But even with the loss to Northern Illinois under this current format,
sure, yeah, no, absolutely.
14 playoff this game would mean nothing.
Yeah, right. And Army is a team that maybe some people are, I don't know who, but people are making a case for as like having a legitimate claim to maybe that G5 spot in the playoff. Definitely an outside shot at best, but hey, you win this game, like I don't know, that like things can kind of get you're in the mix at bare minimum. Like at that point, you're throwing your hat in. So I don't know, that interesting game here. Weird that it's in a neutral site, but yeah, I don't know. I don't hate the Irish to roll here. Moving into a game that is certainly very interesting. Colorado, another team that always part central character as far as the college football conversation go. A lot of chatter, Dion, Travis Hunter, Shadeur, Hunter, obviously right now, the best player in the country, both sides of the ball, front runner for the Heisman and deservedly so, came out this week and said that he is planning to play both sides of the ball in the NFL, which doesn't surprise me. I thought that should be the case, but they are going into Kansas, which is a game being played at Arrowhead, not in Lawrence, Kansas, but being played at the Chiefs' home stadium. They're getting 2.5 points, over under 59.5. Maybe at the beginning, before the season, when we were kind of looking ahead at this game, it's like you wouldn't be able to put a total high enough. It's like this game would be in the 70s, 80s, maybe the 90s, right? Like you wouldn't be able to give me a total high enough to consider an under. We're seeing a little bit more defense maybe from Colorado than we would have expected. I mean, this team is, over the past few weeks, they're playing good ball. Both sides of the ball, really. They've kind of found their groove a little bit. Dion is quieted down from the Dion that we heard last year. And what do you know? I mean, the team's actually seems to be playing better. So obviously Shadeur elite. They have great offensive weapons between Horn and Hunter, but like I said, the story is really the defense, because used to they would need to score 30, 40, 50 in order to get wins. Now their defense is able to get kind of teams off the field. There's not as much of a burden being placed on their offense, and that's translating to wins. So, how do you see this game playing out? Colorado, a team that really is. I mean, they're a legitimate title threat right now for the Big 12. So, what do you see going down here in Kansas City?
Yeah, so a couple things here. First, Colorado has moved to odds-on favorite, so minus number next to their name to win the Big 12. And you saw, 40-1 available. Actually, the Big 12 is kind of funny because Colorado 5.5 regular season win total, Arizona State 4.5, BYU 4.5. Those are your three teams most likely to make the Big 12 title game. All the lowest win totals in the league, and they're all actually at the top of the standings, while the two favorites, Oklahoma State and Utah, at the bottom. Sorry for the diatribe there. But Kansas is a team that's actually way better than what you think. And one thing I look at this time of the year is trending metrics. How teams are currently playing to their overall full season metrics of some, are they getting way better? Has there been a spot really jump or spike in their performance? We've really seen that with the Jayhawks. They've been a bet on team for a couple weeks here. So despite the 4-6 record, looking at my power numbers right here, we got them 22nd in the country, despite the fact that they need to win their next two games to simply make a bowl. They're absolutely a play-on team. Jalen Daniels has been a quarterback who's been really found his way in the offense. Tons of turnover where he plays at the beginning of the year, possibly due to the offensive coordinator change. They have a really good running game. I do think that despite the Colorado front being really improved, I think they can still get got by elite running games like the one Kansas. This Kansas team is 1-5 in one-score games. So, kind of what could their record be if that was flipped? All 6 of their current losses. Well, I don't like this stat personally. I just think it goes to show you the strength of Kansas a little bit. All 6 of their losses are to current teams actively currently in the committee's top 25 playoff rankings from this week. Now let's compare that to Colorado. A team who's obviously surging, and they're kind of slowly becoming the darling. I don't know if people want to give Colorado as many flowers as they can just because they don't like Dion.
Well, they also won a game on a Hail Mary.
So we're about to mention that.
Yeah.
So Colorado's had 3 performances against top 40 teams in the country this year. Nebraska, they lost in convincing fashion. Kansas State lost in a back-and-forth game. And then they beat Baylor virtually on a Hail Mary in a game that went to overtime. So that's like 3 of their worst.
Good Baylor team.
They're better. They're better now.
Yeah,
they're also
middling at best.
They're like Kansas, where they're playing really good now. They started the wrong quarterback this year with Sawyer Robinson. Sawyer Robinson now the starter. They started the wrong quarterback with Daquan Finn from Toledo, who I'm surprised about that. That's another diatribe. So we've seen Colorado's best couple performance against the best teams they've played have been their worst performances of the year. So we've got a Kansas team who we like. I actually don't think they did too well against BYU, but kind of they won that game outright. So good running game here. So I think they can control the clock a little bit. Another key factor here is Kansas' secondary. They have 2 awesome corners, including Kobe Bryant, who we'll see on Sundays. Depth, I don't know how they'll handle Colorado in the slot. We know they have 4 awesome receivers, including Travis Hunter. That'll be interesting. I do kind of lean this game over the total, but I think Kansas has the ability here to control the running game a little bit, keep Shedeur, Travis Hunter off the field, make some plays. I like Kansas in this game. I think they're live to win outright.
Yeah, and
we're going to stick with the high hand here.
I was going to say Kansas running off of you're picking Kansas here to take back-to-back upsets here. Giant killers a little bit here after taking down BYU last week. So
another thing I want to give credit to Colorado that's just not being talked about here, and there's actually an NFL application to this. I think we've heard about the Cincinnati Bengals defensive coordinator Lou Anarumo. He's amazing with the second half adjustments. Look how Cincinnati's defense performs in the second half. Let's think about Cincinnati's defense this season in the NFL. And note that Colorado defensive coordinator Robert Livingston was with the Bengals the past couple of years. Now let's note that Colorado, in first half scoring on defense, they are 79th in points allowed in the first half defense ranked. Second half, 12th. So they take a big step up. Colorado is really performing defensively in that second half. And we're noticing a downtrend with Cincinnati's defenses, the Bengals in the NFL here without Livingston now that he's in Boulder. So that's an interesting note that could actually lend itself to maybe you think about Kansas in the first half here, actually. Maybe that plays into the first half over instead of a full game over. But I'll stick with the full game, and I like Kansas at the 2.5. But and I'll mention it again here shortly. But shop around. Maybe you get a 3. I don't know if I'd rush to bet this one right now. Game's at 3:30 on Saturday, so see if you catch a 3, and if it goes the other way, from 2.5 down to 2 or something, you didn't lose a lot as far as probability there. But gaining the 3 is worth waiting.
Yeah, sure. And this is one that we talked about even before we went live here was I probably Colorado's certainly a team that's a little bit of a public favorite team. I could see them maybe pushing that up to that 3. Wouldn't hate throwing Kansas into whether it be either a money line parlay, a round robin, something like that. Would not.
Birdcage it.
Yeah, right. Wouldn't hate that. Wouldn't hate that angle either. So on that note, we are going to get into some of your best. I think you have 4 for us. Your best 4 picks of the Saturday slate.
Yeah, we'll feature a couple of games we already mentioned. We'll start in Columbus. Indiana, Ohio State. Give me the under 52.5. You heard the breakdown earlier, so I like that one. Then we're gonna go to Vanderbilt. We're gonna take plus 7.5 against LSU, a team I'm really concerned about kind of the state of that team right now. I think they might be a kind of a dead team, and then lots of concerning stuff with Underwood, the quarterback flipping from LSU to Michigan. It's the bad vibes play of the week. I'll admit, not a ton of number value here. This is a little bit of a vibes play in that while I'm neutral on the number, I don't have value on LSU or anything, but kind of playing a Vanderbilt team who I think just really wants to win every game, and I think the bye helped them. They're healthier now, so I'll take the Commodores plus the 7.5. Then we'll go back to where we just were. I'll give out to the Jayhawks at plus 2.5 again. Please shop for the 3. If you can get it before game time, 2.5 is still fine. I do think they're allowed to win the game. You can use this as a money line or kind of, but for official purposes here on the show, we will go with plus 2.5. And finally, because I can't do a show without shouting out the group of 5, let's go with Fun Row, Louisiana Monroe, plus the 3 against Arkansas State. I think it's a great spot for them. Arkansas State just became bowl eligible last week, getting to 6 wins. UL Monroe actually has some really good stats as far as yards per play that kind of makes you think that they are better than Arkansas State on the season. So UL Monroe has 5 wins, chance to become bowl eligible, I believe, for only the second time in school history. This is a program with not a ton of success. Think they'll be really motivated. I do think they win the game outright as well. So give me the Warhawks plus the 3 as the final best bet of the week.
Love to hear that, Bob. Appreciate it as always. Like I said, obviously we will be locked in tomorrow at 12 p.m. Eastern. All eyes of the college football world will be on Columbus, where the Hoosiers are going to storm in and shock the world. But let's be honest. They win that game. Where are they ranked? Where are they ranked if they do the unthinkable? They go into Columbus and win
3.
that game.
3. I think they jump Penn State,
and that's a problem. I'll be honest. They should, how are they? I don't know. They're not. I don't know. 2.
Assuming
they should be
Texas
no
beats
lower
Kentucky.
than 2. That's all I'm saying. No lower than 2.
I don't think you jump.
If they won that game. because it's just like, I don't know, who has a better win than that? Oregon beat Ohio State at home.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe that's just the homer talk, but anyway, number 2 versus number 5. We can't wait. Obviously, you can get your picks in as well in the Tenement app, college football games in there as well. Be sure to check that out, and we will